Hello folks, welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. I need to explain a few things to aspiring South African refugees for the resettlement program in the U.S. There seems to be some widespread misunderstanding of what an embassy is and how a refugee program works. Understandable, since most people don't deal with this every day. But I have addressed this hundreds, if not thousands of times over the past 4 months on my live broadcast, on my refugee question and answer sessions on Sundays, and even in a few prepared videos. But I'm prompted to respond today because of an email that I received this week. And I'm not going to tell you who sent the email. It's not important. And I've responded to this person already, and they shouldn't take offense to me using this content because I've received many emails like this. And frankly, you're not helping yourself or your case. Let me read the following to you and explain to you some misunderstandings, fundamental misunderstandings about how things are working. And I do blame a lot of the confusion on the U.S. government for failing to inform the public, okay? My wife and I have been filling in that statement of interest and sending mails to the U.S. Embassy for maybe two, three times a week with no reply. Well, if you went to the U.S. Embassy website, za.usembassy.gov in South Africa, and you filled out a statement of interest, you filled out a form on a Google server. You didn't send an email in, and you're not going to get a response, an auto reply from an email server because you didn't send it to an email server. So it will tell you it's been submitted after you finish it, click it, then you'll get something on the screen. I'd recommend doing a screen capture, taking a photograph of that. You're not going to get any other reply. My next question is, why are you sending multiple statements of interest? Have you become a different person? I don't mean that in a snarky fashion, but a person, a head of household, sends one statement of interest. Why would you think you would need to send another one? Put yourself in the shoes of the people who are dealing with these applications, these statements of interest. If someone sends multiple statements of interest, what does that mean? Other than they're just trying to annoy you and pester you. You're not helping your case. Once is enough. You're done. Wait your turn and be patient. That's all you can do. Unless you want to piss people off. And I don't know where you're sending emails to the U.S. Embassy. What email address are you sending to? The U.S. Embassy doesn't handle refugee resettlement. The State Department's Bureau of Population, Resettlement, and Migration handles refugee resettlement, not embassies. This is what makes the concept that people ask me, well, I live in Dubai, and why can't they interview me here? Because there's no refugee program in Dubai. Well, I live in Ireland. Why can't because there's no refugee program there. The refugee program is only applicable in this case for South Africans in South Africa. Hence, you must be interviewed in South Africa. The embassy doesn't do this. They have a day job, ladies and gentlemen. I've pointed this out so many times. We don't put embassies in countries to take people out of them to bring them to America. That's not the purpose of an embassy. The embassy is there to represent our interest and act on behalf of the President of the United States. That's why the ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary, which is the role of an ambassador, he is the personal rep, or she is the personal representative of the President of the United States. That's their job, to communicate for the President of the United States and the American people on behalf of the President. The embassy also has other jobs to further our relationship, to tampen down tensions, to understand what's going in a country, and to work with a foreign country so we stay informed of what's going on there. Beyond that, an embassy has consular services, which provide services to Americans overseas and to people who seek to come to America for visas and things like that. Sometimes you also have American information, libraries and things like that to spread information about America so people can find out about America. But the embassy does not do refugee resettlement. It's not their role. The Department of State has a bureau specifically for that. That's their job, to bring people to the United States who are resettling here as refugees, whether they're from Myanmar or Chad or Somalia or South Africa. The embassy doesn't do that. The people that work at the embassy, the Americans and the foreign nationals who work there, South Africans, have a job to do. The attachés liaise with South African authorities. The ambassador interacts with South Africans and the other diplomatic community. And the consular service provides consular services. Who exactly do you all suppose is there to answer your questions about refugee resettlement or deal with your statements of interest? There's nobody at the embassy that does that. That's not the role of the embassy or our consular sections in Durban, Joburg, or Cape Town. Their job is to fulfill their mission. Now, they may facilitate the arrival of other U.S. government actors, particularly from the Department of State or Department of Defense, who come over on a short-term basis, like this Population Resettlement Migration Office may be doing. That's their job. And there's no email to contact. There was temporarily an email that was available for short-term when they gauge interest in the program with what I call the pilot program, or proof of concept, more likely. That's over and done with. Done and dusted. That's no longer been in effect since May 12th when this program was formally announced. So please, stop sending emails and stop filling out multiple statements of interest. All you're going to do is ace yourself out of the program eventually. Keep pissing people off. Maybe. I don't know if you will. Maybe they'll just tolerate you. We also phoned the embassy and got put off by a South African lady. Well, of course you did. What legitimate business do you have at the embassy? Do you have an appointment with somebody at the embassy? An appointment at the consular section for a visa interview to come to America? No, you don't. You have no legitimate business at the embassy. That's why I made this point very early on that if I were running this program in South Africa, since it's in-country resettlement, I would be leasing facilities all over the country and doing the interviews there because that has nothing to do with the embassy. Stop communicating with the embassy. All you're doing is tying up their lines and slowing them down for processing your... So if you send multiple statements of interest, all you're going to do is slow them down. Well, they haven't gotten to me yet. Well, geez, no wonder because you sent 15 statements of interest. Which one are they supposed to believe? Okay? All right. We also tried to go to the embassy, but again, with no success. Again, turned away by the Africans manning the gate and security. Well, the South Africans who work for G4S Security at the American Embassy in Hatfield, their job is to allow legitimate visitors with appointments with the American officials in the embassy to go through security and enter the facility. You will be turned away if you have no legitimate business there. I have no legitimate business at the Chinese embassy in Hatfield. If I go to the gate, they're going to turn me away. I have legitimate business at the High Commission from Swaziland. They're going to turn me away. You have no legitimate business at the American Embassy as a refugee aspirant unless and until you're summoned to come there with an appointment. And then you notify the security and let you in. The fact that they're black has nothing to do with you being turned away. It's nothing to do with them being African or black. It has to do with the fact that they have a job to do. Just like all the people that work in the embassy, South African and American, have a daily job to do, whether it's working for assistance on projects for HIV, which is all frozen now, or it's, doing bilateral defense activities, or it's communicating with the Ministry of Finance issues for gray listing. The Americans in the embassy have a job to do, and it is not to handle your refugee interest. That's not their job. Please stop communicating or trying to communicate or going. Do not phone, do not write emails, do not fill out multiple statements of interest, and do not go to the embassy unless you have a legitimate purpose for being there. And in the case of refugees, the only legitimate purpose you're going to have for going there is when you've been summoned there. Pretty simple, folks. Now, of course, the flying hate monkeys and the white leftist liberal lunatics are going to take this and say, look, the colonel's upset. This isn't upset. You want to see upset? I can show you upset. You want to see short-tempered? I'll show you short-tempered. This is simply an explanation to people who don't seem to understand how this works. Anyway, folks, the embassy's not there for refugees. I hope that's clear. You're not doing yourself any favors by pestering people at the embassy because that's not their job. Do you know what they're going to do? Flush, flush, delete, 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 delete. It's not their job. Keep pestering them. It's not going to work. Anyway, there you have it, folks. Little update on that situation. Cheers. I wish you all well.